Hello, and welcome to the Learn and Work Smarter podcast. This is episode 73, and today we're talking about how to get better at something. Whether you're a high school, college, or graduate student, or you are a professional in the workforce, or perhaps both, at some point you are going to need to get better at something. Now, of course, there are a ton of scenarios in which we just naturally get better at something simply because we are doing it every day and we learn as we go. Every day that you show up to your econ class, you get better at econ class. Every day that you show up to your office to do your job, you get better at your job. But what we're talking about today is different. Today's episode is about how to get intentionally better at something that you really care about, whether it's, there's a deadline attached or not. And how to make sure that your progress is obvious and measurable. I'm going to walk you through a simple but powerful two-pronged approach for improvement. And by the end of this episode, you're going to have a framework that you can apply to anything you want to get better at, whether it's for school or work or just for you. All of the resources I mentioned today you can find in the show notes at learnandworksmarter.com/podcast/73 because this is episode 73. So let's go. Hello, you are listening to the Learn and Work Smarter podcast, the podcast for students and professionals who want to learn and work smarter. I'm your host, executive function coach, and founder of schoolhabits.com, Katie Azevedo. As a reminder, everything I mention in today's episode will be linked in the show notes, including a link to the transcript, which you can also find at learnandworksmarter.com/podcast. All right, so let's just jump into the heart of today's episode, this two-pronged approach that I mentioned at the beginning. Prong one, we get better at things by thinking about them and understanding them better conceptually. Okay, and then prong two, we get better at something by mechanically and physically doing the thing, also known as practice. We very rarely get better at something if we only ever think about it and read about it and talk about it, but never do it. And then very rarely do we ever get better at something if we only ever focus on the brunt muscle of doing something without fully understanding the concepts and more abstract framework behind what we're doing. And here's something important to understand just right from the start. This is not a one and done situation and not a one and done approach like prong one, prong two, you're done. It is a cycle. We move between learning and practicing over and over again as we level up. That's normal, and that's actually the goal of this entire approach. We're going to talk about that a little bit later in the episode. Now, I'm going to work through a couple examples today, starting with one that all of us know, and that is the act of riding a bicycle. So if you remember the very first time that you were on a bike, or maybe that you taught somebody to ride a bike, whether you knew it or not, both parts of this two-pronged approach were in action. My kids are teens, but when I taught each of them how to ride a bike, we gave a pep talk beforehand, something like, hold the handlebars. These bars here steer the bike. These are the brakes on the handlebars that you squeeze if you want the bike to stop. These are the pedals. Keep pedaling them so you don't fall over. And if you think you're going to tip over, put your feet down, something like that. Now, if I just plopped my kid in front of a video about how to ride a bike and made him read a book on how to ride a bike, but I never put their bum on a bike, they'd have a real hard time riding a bike. Now, I know that that is a very basic example, but let's take it up a notch. Let's say that you want to learn a foreign language. For example, just for the sake of ease here, we're going to say Spanish. Okay, the best approach would be to learn the language conceptually, starting with some grammatical frameworks and maybe the alphabet. And then from there, you have to understand how to conjugate, the endings of different verbs. And you have to know how those endings change depending on the tense and who is doing the verb. Okay, unless you're learning Spanish as a native speaker in full immersion, like because you were born in Spain, okay, we don't just learn these things by hearing them. We have to intentionally study them and learn how the tenses and the conjugations work together. That's part one. But then if all we ever do is read about Spanish grammar and maybe listen to Spanish podcasts, as I love to do, but we never get in the ring and try to speak it, we're not going to get better at it. No, I don't mean to ruffle any feathers here, but that's why I am not the biggest fan of Duolingo and apps that are just one-dimensional like that. Because not only is there very little teaching in those apps, but you're missing all of part two. Clicking an answer to a multiple choice question does not teach you Spanish to any degree of functional fluency. So read about it, study it, learn the framework, maybe watch some explanatory videos, maybe some podcasts, and then get out there and speak it. That is how you get better at Spanish or, at any foreign language for that matter. Now let's talk about work. Let's say that you want to get better at, I'm just going to pick an example that's relevant to me, video editing. All right, maybe you work for the marketing department, or you're helping a company with their media, or you run your own business and you're doing some kind of video, as most businesses do these days. Obviously, there are some super simple apps out there that you can learn quickly for basic, super basic video editing projects, on your phone. But let's say you want to learn something more robust, like Adobe Premiere Pro. Okay, so you're going to learn the quickest by coming at it from that two-pronged approach. Prong one is maybe to watch some beginner tutorials. Maybe start by getting some of the vocabulary right and figure out, what the different editing tools on the software interface do. For example, the difference between like a clipping tool and a ripple edit tool. You might even have a friend who's good at Premiere Pro and they can teach you some very basic things. Now, all of that is really helpful and essential to getting better at Premiere Pro, learning how it works, learning the different tools, their names, learning how the interface is set up, what the functionality of different things is. Perfect. That is all part one. But then you have to actually get in there and play with some video footage. Take some random video footage from your cell phone and import it into Premiere Pro and start playing around with it. Try out the tools for real. Try to make edits for real. Mechanically and physically get in there and practice the thing you want to get better at. You have to practice. You have to practice doing the thing you want to get better at an unreasonable number of times. But get in there and get your hands dirty. All right, now let's look at an example that's maybe a little more abstract. It's still a skill, but it's not like speaking Spanish or learning, video editing. But let's say it's communicating. All right, so let's say you want to become a better public speaker, or at least a better speaker in some kind of crowd. Awesome. All right, so what would the first step be? What would part one look like? Maybe that starts with some simple research about tips for public speaking. Maybe you get granular and research tips for engaging an audience or tips for better vocal articulation. If you want to get better at spontaneous communication, well, then maybe you research some active listening strategies, because I'm convinced that the better listener you are, the better communicator you are. You might watch some videos of engaging speakers. You may even want to start taking some notes on what you learn and maybe reach out to someone whose communication style you admire. Ask if they'll meet with you for a 10-minute phone call or a cup of coffee and straight up ask them, how did you get good at communicating? Or maybe you just watch how they do it and again, take notes on their body language and their voice and their intonation and their eye contact. What are they doing with their hands and how long they're pausing, when they increase their volume, when they slow down or speed up. That is all part one. Now, I feel like I can hear some people being like, that's bananas. I would never reach out to somebody and say, how do you communicate well? But listen, the whole point of this entire episode is how to get better at something. And so that takes a different level of strategies than just saying, okay, well, I'm just going to low key improve at a natural organic rate at this thing. Okay, that's one approach too. But we're talking about there is a skill, there is something that you want to, get better at a rate that's faster than just, a natural progression. So that means the strategies you use have to be different. That means reaching out to people who are better than you at the thing you want to get better at and asking them for advice. All right, so that is all part one. And then what would part two look like? Because remember, you can read 1,000 books and watch 1,000 speeches about good communication, but unless you get out there and talk to people and practice communicating, you're not going to get better at it. So for part two, put yourself in as many situations as possible for you to practice the skill. Go to social events with the goal of speaking to, at least 3 people. When you go out to dinner with your friends, how about you're the one to propose making a toast? You could even record yourself on a video or even just, a voice recorder with nobody watching and then play back and give yourself feedback on what you heard. Yes, people do this. the more situations you can put yourself in where you practice the skill. Even if it's hard, even if it's uncomfortable, even if you don't want to do it, you'll get better at it. Now, here's the thing about this two-pronged process. This is really important. So if you zoned out, come back to me. It does not work like this, okay? Do part 1, do part 2, over and done, right? Now you're really good at the thing. If only it worked that way. As I said at the beginning of this episode, it's actually a cycle. It's part 1 and then part 2, and then maybe a little bit more part 1, and then maybe a little more part 2. And then you keep going through the cycle, honing in on more specific areas that you want to get better at in the broader category of the thing that you're trying to get better at. So I'll give you an example because I feel like that may be a little confusing. So going back to our learning Spanish example, let's say that you want to start with a basic level of Spanish. Great. So you do some research on basic vocabulary and probably just present tense conjugations with some basic verbs, maybe some common expressions like hi, how are you, please and thank you, what time is it, things like that. And then for part 2, you would get out on the field and you'd practice that. You'd practice conjugating as many verbs in the present tense as possible and saying hi, how are you, and what time is it, to as many people as possible. And you're gonna get better at that the more you practice that. But then let's say that you want to learn past tense. Cool. So Google the Spanish conjugations for past tense verbs and maybe add on a few more expressions and mix them up with your present tense conjugations. See if you can handle it in real life. Go find a Spanish-speaking friend or go to a location where you might be asked to speak Spanish, like a certain restaurant or a certain part of your city, and practice. If those options are not available to you, practice in the mirror or in the shower or on your walk. But if you don't practice and you only read and research and think about it, you're not going to get any better. Okay? And then the cycle continues with every next level of Spanish you want to unlock. Same for video editing. Let's say that you watched some helpful tutorials and had your friend give you a quick rundown of some of the basic stuff inside, Premiere Pro, and then you edited some simple sequences. Cool. But now you want to start working with graphics and B-roll. Awesome. That's when you would return to part 1, right? The cycle piece. You do your research, you understand conceptually how these things work, when you should use B-roll, when you should not use B-roll. Don't take my advice. I hardly ever use B-roll. I just sit in front of my camera and talk, whatever. How do you blend it seamlessly with your main footage? All that stuff. Again, you would watch some videos, maybe even go to the Premiere Pro support forums and learn a little bit about how these things work. That's all part 1. Then you have to, at some point, open up a new video project and get in there and start playing around. Nobody cares if you mess up, okay? Try adding B-roll. Practice the transitions. Practice the timing. Practice, practice, practice in unreasonable amount of times. And then you continue like this until you get better. And then maybe you want to learn some other element of video editing. Great. Well, then you repeat the cycle again and again and again. Now, I do have an important point to make. I recommend that there is more practice than research. There obviously has to be some research because I just spent half this episode talking about the importance of understanding, conceptually how something works. But the most rapid progress occurs when you spend twice as much time getting your hands dirty and doing the actual thing you want to get better at. Twice as much time practicing. Now, I know we all know the expression practice makes perfect, and I am definitely not the first one to say that it should actually be practice makes progress, right? I didn't come up with that. But that is the golden truth. The more you do something, the better you're going to get at it. So if you're dead set on getting better at something, you've got to go out and create opportunities for you to do the thing. Let me give you a few more quick hit examples to drive this point home because we all like examples. If you want to become a better writer, start by learning the mechanics, maybe sentence structure, different essay formats, how to hook a reader, keep them engaged. That's the conceptual part. That's all part 1. Okay, or prong 1, whatever. I forget what I'm saying at this point. Prong 1. And then you actually have to write. And I don't just mean when you have a school assignment or a blog post due. I mean create opportunities to write. Create your own opportunities, journal entries, summaries of things that you read, rewrites of your favorite book endings. And then the ninja move is to get feedback on your writing and incorporate that feedback into the next writing piece that you create. Do you want to be a better thinker? Cool. Learn how. Research critical thinking frameworks, argument structures, decision-making models. I talk about some of these in episode 68. And I have a new thinking focused episode coming soon. And then a practice, thinking intentionally. Take a belief you hold and, hold the opposite side for 10 minutes in your head. See if you can develop the opposite perspective of an argument that you hold dear and solid to yourself. Go for a walk and think through a single topic without distractions. No earbuds. Practice thinking the way you would practice a sport. See the pattern? Conceptual understanding first, and then deliberate, messy, real-world practice. And while you can absolutely make incredible progress on your own, I do want to share one more strategy that can take your improvement to the next level. And that is working with a coach, a mentor, a teacher who's already excellent at the thing you want to get better at. One way to do this, if accessibility is a problem, is to seek out the top 5 experts in the things you want to get better at and study them. Okay, maybe you want to get better at guitar. Cool. So you might want to study Carlos Santana and Jimi Hendrix and George Harrison. Obviously, you're not going to hire them as guitar teachers, but you can find hours and hours of video footage of them playing, and you can find interviews where they talk about their strategies and their approaches. Or you could hire a guitar teacher. A good guitar teacher is going to explain the theories and the concepts and the strings and the chords, and then they're going to provide the opportunity for you to practice while giving you feedback. Working with a coach or a trainer also keeps you accountable when it's really easy to say, not today. Right now, if you want to be a better runner, you can read some books about nutrition and stride and equipment, and you can go out for your daily runs. But if you really want to up-level it, the way you do that would be to hire a trainer so that all of your practice is focused and gets you more return on your investment. If you want to get better at any academic skill of any kind, studying, for example, you need to start by learning what real studying is and what real studying is not, and learning specific study strategies that are based in cognitive science, and then learning about different study strategies for different kinds of content. And then you have to get in there and use these strategies on your own material for your own tests. If you're a student inside School Habits University, this is exactly what you get. A full year of coaching with me, where you don't just learn study strategies, you actually practice them with support and feedback and structure. It helps you improve way faster than trying to figure it all out alone. Whatever the thing is that you want to get better at, you have to do it. And you have to do it a lot. And you have to do it when you don't want to. And you have to do it when it's hard. And you have to do it knowing that you're going to be really bad at it in the beginning. You just have to do it. Not a single person that you know who's good at something got good at that thing without an unreasonable amount of practice. All right, my friend. That brings us to the end of today's episode. I think it was a shortish one. If you found this helpful, or if you thought of someone else who's working hard to level up in some kind of area, would you take a second to share this episode with them? It is as easy as tapping the little arrow wherever you're listening or watching this and sending the link in a quick email or text. I appreciate you being here with me today. Your time matters, and investing it in yourself like this matters even more. And as always, say it with me. Never stop learning.